Welcome to Pulp Tales, fascinating stories of the pulp magazines and the creative minds that brought them to life. The fictioneers, the artists, the editors, and others. Brought to you by the PulpNet. Learn more about the pulp magazines through articles, blogs, bibliographies, links, more than 130 episodes of this podcast, and much more. Online at thepulp.net. Your link to the pulp magazines for over 30 years.
Yeah, they're on the corner of their building. It's still there. A marker is where it says Street and Smith. You look at the building and you'll see. It's still there.
Oh.
And so that's where I headed there and I talked to Mr. Hines.
During the 1970s and 80s, longtime pulp fan, collector, and historian Albert Tonik took his cassette recorder along during interviews with pulpsters and to PulpCon, the precursor to PulpFest. Those recordings, the Tonik Tapes, preserved voices and memories that might otherwise have been lost. This is the first of several interviews from that collection to be featured on Pulp Tales. Al Tonik received one of the pulp community's highest honors, the Lamont Award, in 1994. He passed away in 2018 at the age of 92. In this episode, Al talks with artist Jerome Rozen about his career in the pulp magazines, including his covers for the Shadow magazine. The interview was recorded on September 27, 1983. 2026 marks the 95th anniversary of the debut of the Shadow magazine. Al's article, In the Shadow of Jerome Rozen, based on this interview, is available now at thepulp.net.
This is Albert Tonik on Tuesday, September 27th. I'm at the home of Jerome and Doris Rozen.
My husband has put them through those paces I don't know how many times.
Oh, who's done this?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You've been written about before?
Yeah, I've had a few.
Oh, gosh. Oh. How would you like to be written about for the pulp magazines?
It didn't make a difference to me.
Oh, all right.
No.
All right. When were you born, Jerome?
3 o'clock this morning.
You started like
No, I was born in 1895, believe it or not.
Where?
In Chicago.
In Chicago. Okay. And you were identical twin with
George. His name is George Jerome, and mine is Jerome George.
Okay.
To make it sticky.
make it sticky together.
Yeah.
What art school did you go to?
I was Institute of Chicago at the end, and then I taught there for a while.
You taught at the Institute
The
of
Art
Chicago.
Institute of Chicago, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, you know how artists, everybody shows you something and you grab it. But a man by the name of Swinnerton, I think, was the one that really got us going.
Swinnerton?
James Swinnerton.
I've seen that name before.
You saw it in the newspaper. You used to have little Jimmy.
Yes.
But
Yes.
he lived in Flag, too, in
Mm-hmm.
the Weatherford Hotel. And we got acquainted with him, and he used to go out sketching together. And he was very interested. You know, he introduced us to a new paint color that I hadn't ever seen before. It's called Murata. And I've tried to buy it since I've been working in another field.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't buy it anymore. But there was a color where it gave you all kinds of gradings and things. It was very handy, and we liked it. So I used that in great deal for a while. Murata.
Did you and George both start in commercial work at the same time, or?
Well, it went like this. George was a manager of the Western Union in Flagstaff. They had a repeater station.
Yes.
And he was working on that, and then he gave that up, and I'm not sure what. When the Army came along, he went to the Army at the little after I had gone into it,
Mm-hmm.
and I went to France, and he stayed in somewhere in Michigan, I think it was. And that was what started that. And I went to art school then, and he got the idea when he got out of that thing to come over and try the same stunt that I was doing, studying art. So he went to the Art Institute about a year after I was there. He started in there at Chicago.
Didn't one of you go to an art school in Philadelphia or New York? Walter Baumhofer said that he was in the same class with one of you.
I the Baumhofer must have been George, not me.
Oh, okay.
What school could that have been? I knew pretty. George did a lot of things. He snooped around a lot of.
I
don't.
I don't remember now, but
Yeah.
Baumhofer mentioned that he was in the same
Baumhofer,
class.
you may know.
Baumhofer, yeah.
Then I studied sculpting a little bit at night under a man sculptor.
Oh.
I still have a chromo upstairs.
What do you sculpt it, you know?
With clay, you make it with clay, and then you cast it in
The
glass.
horse, you make it upstairs?
Not the horse, but the man.
Or the man?
Yeah, the man on the shovel, on the shovel. Well, anyway, that was, maybe that was the school you're thinking of, but that wasn't much of a school.
No. You said that you were in France during World War One.
I was in France during the World War One.
Were you a soldier in the trenches, or?
I was in trenches, all right, but never up at the front. But I was on my way up there. I was up at Long, France. They pulled me out and went to the officers' training school. They pulled me out for the officers' training school at Long. And when I was up there, my outfit was pulled and broken up and sent up to the front, and they got badly shot up.
Oh.
I lost a very dear friend, Mark Moore, and he was from Flagstaff. And there were some others, too, were chewed up pretty badly. And well, that took care of the Army. Then I got out of that. I went back to Bordeaux, and I stayed there for a little while until we were ready to sail back to America. And then I was taken back on a warship instead of an old freighter. It was when we went up on a freighter. So that's
when were you in Flagstaff? You said you were born in Chicago and you went to art school in Chicago.
Yeah.
When were you in Flagstaff?
Back and forward. There were so many trips backward and forward. But we were the first trip to Flag or sometime. I was born in Chicago about, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years old. I wouldn't know what age that was.
Right.
But it was very early in life. And it didn't stay there very long. I had a brother, and they thought that would help his health, and he passed away.
Oh.
And then we all flew back to Chicago. And but that hooked us into Flagstaff, so we went back to Flag later on. And backward and forward. That's the whole trip's backward and forward. That's what it amounted to.
Okay. When did you move to New York?
That's going to be hard because it's more recent, and I can't remember that as well as I can some of the others.
Yeah.
Yes, I understand.
Let's see if I can tell. Well, it must have been about 1920 or somewhere in 22, somewhere, I don't know.
Okay.
Somewhere in there. At that time, I gave up the teaching and all the stuff I'd been doing there. And I married. And that was occasion of first marriage. And I'm sorry to say I don't remember the date of it.
Right. Okay. Well, that's it.
And then we got an apartment in New York.
And you started working for Boys Life then, or?
Yeah, that's about the time that I hooked in with Boys Life. Yeah.
Were you doing interior illustrations or cover illustrations?
I did both.
Both.
But most of them were a very straight illustration. They would send me a serial. You know,
yes.
Continuation.
Right.
And I'd take it with me, and even when I traveled a good deal, which I did, to Arizona and so on and so forth, I carried that with me and made illustrations in Chicago, in Arizona, and send them in, see. And that's the way that went for years.
It's your wife thing, too, you know?
Yeah, my wife.
Yeah, the first one.
Yeah, she was in school. That's where I met her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did in Chicago. That was in Chicago.
Yeah, or the one Chicago.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're totally.
Most do you want to know. That doesn't bring us up to date.
No, it's not up to date yet. And how did you get to go to Street and Smith? Or did you
just choose 2 legs?
I mean, how did you hear about it? Did you see it all?
I looked around in magazines, what was being done and all, but I had an idea maybe it might be worthwhile.
Okay, you just saw it on the newsstands. No one recommended
No,
it.
on the corner of their building, it's still there. A marker is where it says Street and Smith. You look at the building and you'll see. It's still there.
Oh.
And so that's where I went. I headed there and I talked to Mr. Hines.
Hines?
Yeah, Dick Hines. I think, no, not Dick. This is a different one. What is Pop Hines' first name? Do you know that?
No.
I can't remember what his first name, but his name was Hines anyway. And he was very good to me. He gave me a job doing a cover, and that started me off in another way.
Was that Hines?
You know? Doris got to know him better than I did.
How do you spell Hines?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's probably pretty close.
I think so, but
I went to see him in the hospital, I know, and they had something on the. Well, that wouldn't give me the name anyway. He got in the hospital and
So
passed away.
so your first job for Street and Smith was a cover.
That cover, that's right.
Do you remember what magazine it was for?
No.
Okay. But then you did do some of the early shadow covers. In fact,
Yes, I did. I think they got me down for 3. They had record 3. I mean.
Mm-hmm. You did the ones with the hooded shadow?
No, that hadn't developed into that yet.
Oh.
They're in the book. I can't remember what they were.
I'll look them up.
But anyway, they were. I think there were 3. Anthony picked up one.
Mm-hmm.
It had to do with a fire or something. I don't know.
All right.
But let's see where I go for it. In that time, I was doing a lot of searching around. Went to different magazines, and I got hooked up with the Red Book magazine. I did got a lot of illustration.
This was even before your accident?
You went to Red Book? Now, let me see, was that before or was that after? No, that must have been a little after.
Okay.
No, because when I cracked up, I was out for about a long time.
Were you driving the car, or?
I was driving in, and a big bus came, and I was deadheading back, and it smacked into me. My wife was in the car sitting next to me, and she died. And I was in the hospital for, I don't know, months.
Months.
Oh, yeah, months. Regularly banging up my head. I got the works that time, but I pulled too. She didn't. And then, go on, Doris, tell me from there. Then I went back to the studio. I was paying rent in there all that time. I couldn't let go. My things were in there. And John Howard was it was in the front room in that building, and he had a big studio there too. And then Les Strasher took over another studio. You know, he did Liberty covers. He did the one right next to me. So there was Howard, and another man, a photographer by the name of Marsh, and myself. We were on the floor.
Yeah, and Chester was on that floor.
But Chester came in later. See, he took over Howard's studio later on. Howard pulled out of it, and Chester went in there. And Howard moved into the back studio, which was mine, which was the little one. Yeah. And then when Leslie Thrasher pulled out, in fact, I think he was killed. I think he was. Then I moved into his studio. And that was the big middle studio, and that's where I stayed the rest of my...
Did you say his name was Thrasher?
Thrasher, Leslie Thrasher. Okay. Oh, you know his covers. I'm sure you know him.
I may have.
The Liberty magazine, and he did a lot of other things.
Okay. When did you meet Doris?
No, that Doris shouldn't go on there. Where did I meet you? There's so much goes in between. You don't think this.
Okay.
And so we got to know each other. And then I was just...
Caswell.
Yeah.
Caswell was the one that introduced me.
And I got a book to illustrate. And I didn't have a studio at the time, so Jerome invited me to use his studio. So I did. And we had fun. Then we formed a very nice little group there because there was another artist in the building next door. And
Lauren Wilbur. Norman?
No.
He was in the building on that side. And then there was a photographer downstairs by the name of Marsh.
Yeah. So it was a nice little group. We had lots of fun.
Yeah.
And we had nice parties. Everything was really okay. I knew around 10 years before we were married. And we've only been married for 32 years.
It seems like a century.
Only 32.
Yeah.
It seems like a century.
Yeah, like a what?
A century, that's all right. You wouldn't know what that means, a century. But anyway, that's the way the story piles up. Then we married. And in the meantime, you moved down here with me and Etch. And that's it. From then on,
And here we are.
And here we are,
Right
still
up.
on it.
Right.
They did a lot of traveling. We went to, coast. How many trips did we make to Arizona and all that? I bought some land out there and we thought we'd do something with it. And we still have it.
Oh,
And it's gone up in value pretty well. Very well, isn't it?
Yeah, but what you see, George and Ellen had a beautiful home in East
That's it, yeah.
Long Island, and they sold and they went out west. See, Drum's family was out there,
yes, reflect that.
live on down Sedona. And, but unfortunately, his wife developed cancer. We had all the plans made. Jerome found in a beautiful house in a beautiful studio. And they had found this gorgeous brown forest. They bought some from Brooklyn. I had never been to Arizona, and George had been out there, and he came to the studio one day, and he had a bunch of pictures that he took out there. Oh, I was just carried away. I was tranced. So, but we got out there. Well, they showed us the ground they bought, and Jerome saw how keen I was about it. He bought some for us, and they were going to build studios together. It's a beautiful piece of ground. And we went further than that. We bought some up above the pine belt up in Flagstaff. So, but when his wife passed away,
Things fell apart,
yeah.
yeah. Sure, that they usually do.
I know. Yeah.
So here we are.
Kind of hard to recover from that.
Yeah, it's kind of hard.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And then since then, I've been doing what?
Look beautiful. Yeah.
Did you ever go back and do any more pulp work?
She did. I they sees me. I've done some of that.
Wow.
Well, I'm doing pulp work now.
Yes, you're doing pulp work now, but I meant
No, nothing.
for the pulp.
I think all
magazines.
through my career, though, I hooked up with another concern called Carl Percy.
Cloud.
Carl.
Oh, Carl.
Carl
Yeah.
Percy.
CARL.
Mm-hmm.
And they fit in, among other things. I kept all these things going. And they had a window display and that sort of thing. And I hooked into an account called
Yeah. No, you talking the thing of the mail pouch?
Mail Pouch. It was chewing tobacco.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember.
I made all those things for over 15 years. I made all those things. In fact, Claire has a lot of the copies. He's got them over there in Ohio.
That's one of the.
There were tons of it. I don't know how many tons.
A rough sketch for one of the paintings, the center one.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I made him a preliminary to give him an idea how the thing was going to work out with what the materials they had. And then I'd paint them up. And there was 3 pictures. They came out as a triptych. You understand? 3. One center and then 2 smaller ones.
Okay.
Triptychs. And that made the window display. And I with them, and then later on, Carl Percy died. His lighthouse, I think, passed away first, though, didn't he? He was the art director. He was a co-partner, by the way. And then finally, Carl Percy passed away. Percy passed before Lighthouse. I remember that. But anyway, I fell out to a lot of books that they had there and stuff. They wanted me to have them, and I took them. Just in the closet.
Yeah, I know. But then after that, Jerome learned to advertise it.
Yeah, well, I got in advertising, but Al Paul Lifton gave me the big start. Although I worked for a good many of the agencies.
Al Paul left him to Philadelphia.
They had the Penn Railroad. I mentioned about it, but they used to drive me crazy with the amount of work they'd throw at me. They'd give me one job, and before I got it down there, they'd send a man after it, and they'd be shooting another one to me. They kept me going, and they couldn't make up their mind on some of those accounts. They didn't know what they wanted, you know. But we got along. I got money out of it, and I think they were happy as the whole thing went through.
Yeah, then after that, you do a lot of other things for Baker.
Yeah, well, then I got tied up with a man by the name of George Baker. Oh, you know more about this than I do. He ran, what would you call that thing?
Well, he had a big,
He had a big client.
No, it's representative.
Yeah, I guess you'd call him that. He has a place up in the Great Bar building.
Yeah, and this
But he called on me.
Bar.
Yeah. And then I got to doing Schlitz beer for a long while. Oh, I don't know, everything. And then I got in with a lot of these gasoline things, like the what is it,
Shell.
Shell.
Yeah.
Oh, I did a terrific amount of work.
Billboard.
Billboard stuff,
You
24.
probably saw them.
Yes.
Oh, sure. They were all over the country. They were national. So that's because the things that fall, but a lot of little things in between there you nibble in and do them. I would know, but that pretty nearly sums it up. Those are some big ones that kept me pushed. You know.
But that's right. Most of the advertising was really art rather than photographs
That's right.
in those days.
That's right.
And then, well, this
Photographs were secondary. If I did touch photographs, your name was in mud.
Yeah.
That's an actual fact. But that changed after a while. That changed. Now it's all photograph.
All photographs.
So they had better. They had color film came in,
Mm-hmm.
which wasn't in vogue at the other time.
Right.
Oh, there were a lot of different things.
well, photography took over even for magazine illustration.
Well, that's what it was.
Yes.
Oh, that's a chance.
I had a man I had several men that did the photography for me that I needed after a while. Don Selchow, he's pretty well known. He used to be up on 42nd Street, then later on he moved up.
Well,
I
that's
think
why I thought you might have seen Baumhofer.
I may have, Doris, I can't be sure. And I saw him there, and I went, what was the other fellow, the one I had on 6th Avenue, that photographer? What was he?
I can't remember his name.
I think that's where I last saw Bowman.
Yeah, Jerome's had quite a checkered career.
Well, I've been around the block.
Did he tell you when he started to paint? Well, I mean, when he went to Chicago Art Institute after the war.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have any
And
training.
then nothing flat. He was teaching there.
Yes, he mentioned that.
No, I should teach myself a few things. How to make shadow heads.
Mine, what
Me, I
over there.
I didn't study anything.
Beautiful, but you had to.
That's Ocean. I only went to California. I couldn't
Yeah, Jerome did that.
in California.
No, Jerome didn't do it from life, did he?
I made some sketches, rough sketches, and I made this more recently.
Yeah, quite recent.
I had the sketches.
Have you done any commercial work recently, or?
That thing is dead.
Okay.
It's dead. It is for me anyway.
So for the last 20 years, you really haven't done any real work then?
No,
Since you-
except Pulps and their work. Boy, there's men with their own kind of a chin and nose and stuff, and you got to work on them. And you're guilty now.
I am guilty, yes.
No kidding. Glad to do it. Well, anyway, that's pretty near the way the thing runs.
Okay, you finally closed up in 1964? I think you said before.
I think that was, as near as I can place it. I gave up the studio at 163 West 23rd. I had a nice studio then with benefits.
Yeah, it was a good studio. It had two Scala.
And two
studio.
what's the other one?
How big was that studio, Jerome?
I think I measured something like 45 feet long. And it was a 25-foot lot, so it was about 20 feet wide.
And look where Jerome's painting now. Would you believe?
In the garage.
Oh, that light drives you insane. You know?
That light it's worse this year than it was last year because the trees grew bigger
Oh,
and the green's cutting, and then the green does changes color.
yeah.
That makes it hard.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're getting. In the morning, if the sun comes up, I have to wait till the sun passes enough so it doesn't come in the window. And by that time, then the trees start working on me, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had all these greens coming down and blocking out the light from me. I couldn't see. And you know, when you hung up washing, Helen,
Yeah.
it helped because
Yeah.
it gave you light to reflect it back in. But every time I can't change the picture that much, see? It makes it kind of hard. I have to kind of guess what's going to happen.
I'm going to hang a glass every day.
That's an idea. Maybe I should put out a big white sheet there and reflect.
Yeah, I told you, if you had
Yeah.
one, put it
Well, anyway.
every day.
In the meantime, we bought this house, and that's been here ever since. We've been in this house ever since.
Well, Jerome bought this house way back when.
Yeah, that was in 32. The building was 2 years old at that time. Lived there for years.
So you lived here and went to work in New York City.
Yeah, I worked working in on a bus, and then or whatever I needed.
Well, it's very convenient. The bus just.
It was handy for me then. I think now it'd be a pain in the neck.
Oh, that's true. George's paintings back there.
Yeah, those are two little ones. He used to do little landscapes, yeah. The one that's taken down in Sedona. We owned a ranch down there. That was
But, you
it.
know, that thing is getting murky. You know,
That little one below there is Oak Creek. And that's
George stayed with the Pulps, didn't he?
he did primarily.
Yes.
George stayed with the pubs pretty well.
Oh, I like that.
George's good.
Yeah. That's Oak Creek coming down there. Boy, right today,
Yeah,
got to see the
yeah.
price on those things.
Oh, this is in Arizona.
Oh, it's a
Beautiful place.
Yeah, you can't tell on this stuff. Yeah. Hey, if you see you in there, you like. It's very nice.
I was looking well.
This fellow John Howlett, he stayed with the Pulps too, as I recall.
Well, you know, he didn't want to.
Oh,
This is between you and me and the gatepost. He did them because well, it was a means of making a livelihood. John didn't fare too well financially.
Or didn't John paint some pops?
He painted more than I thought because a book came out later, and they all have John's name on them.
And I had I never saw anything that said.
Well, you know what? That was funny. He figured, I'm sure this film. I knew John so well. I knew him as he knew me too, just the same way. But he figured if you were known for me doing pulps, you'd never get any more work. And the funny thing was, that's right.
oh, really? So that was
I'm not kidding you. I'm giving.
that was a bad name if you did Pulps, huh?
Well, it labeled you as in a different class.
Yes.
It was called low down. If you want to know what I mean by expression, not to slow down, but I mean it's.
Yeah, I understand.
He was shooting for the higher ups.
Sure.
He'd like to have done portraiture and big painting and stuff, and of course he couldn't always get that.
Sure. You know, well, didn't they look down on illustrators?
Oh,
Yeah.
I think they did. And I was doing a lot of illustrating, a lot of these Gladys Hasty Carroll stories. You know, a whole flock of them flew at me. They were all serials. I meant 6 or 7 months, maybe 8, 9 months for one story. You know, you get the characters in development and all that sort of thing. And
Who was this author?
Gladys Hasty Carroll. Then they gave her a big dinner.
Where did she write?
She was up in Maine.
Yeah, but I mean, what magazine?
Red Book mostly that I know of. I don't know. She's not been in others I know of. But mostly Red Book magazine at that time. And they suggested I go up there and look when they gave me the discern and look the ground over and see what was there that might be usable, which I did do. Dr. Della, that was my first wife, and I went up there and we combed it over pretty well. We met the Gladys Hasty Carroll. She was living up there at that time. And she showed us around and gave us a good rundown on what was going on up there, which helped a lot. She had other stories came out after it, and I got illustrated several of them for the Red Book, by the way.
No, but book illustrator general, any illustrator, they really, and especially the magazine, all Saturday Evening Post. I remember the fun they poked at them. Steve.
Yeah, that's the way it went. Well, anyway, John, I knew his position. I knew his trouble and everything about that man. I was very, very close to him.
Well, times change and manners change.
Yeah.
Wars.
I also did some pubs for another outfit. Was it Dell Publishing?
It was Dell, yes.
Well, I guess I hit most of the magazines. I did some 1 or 2 maybe,
Mm-hmm.
But that was in the beginning. I did some for Dell. I don't remember how many of them. Steger was then. Steger was connected with a different magazine or group at that. How did he start out?
Yeah, he was an editor or something.
Yeah, that's right. He was in a different location too.
It wasn't McFadden. Maybe it might have been Dell. I don't remember.
Dell came in later.
Oh,
He was with something else before that. I got another.
And then in about 1931 or something, he went and formed his own company.
He formed the Dell.
Well, no, Popular Publication.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Popular Publication. He formed that. Yeah.
Yeah. It might have been McFadden that he worked for. I don't remember.
No, it had no connection with Fadden that I know of, because there's a lot of in between.
Yeah.
You never know how that stuff is handled. It all went on there. I don't think he was okay with Fadden.
But he was an editor for an aviation book, something like Warbirds or something, and this Steger was.
I don't know what he was for. Did one job for him on something, and then when they went to the Dell, they finally contacted me again, and I got in a few. I used to do a few of them for him, not very often. In the beginning, later on, between the mail pods, which gave me these 15 pictures a year, was enough. It was quite a little, and then what other stuff I could pick up on the outside of that. That's what kept me going. It was fun. When I look back at it, things now I could cuss it kind of badly that time, but now it's all over. It's all over.
Sure, well, the sting is out.
Yeah, there isn't that same kind of a sting there was before.
There isn't that pressure.
Well, it was competition. It was kind of a stimulus too.
Yeah.
Don't let it fool you.
And then
It
after,
could stimulate me.
well, then Jerome was working for J. Walter Thompson. The big
I did an awful lot of stuff at times.
and they give you a due date, and one day.
But that was Lefton you're thinking of.
No, I'm thinking of Thompson.
Oh, they did it too.
And they told him all about it, and he said, "Yeah, what's the date? When is it due?" And it was before the date they were given.
Yeah, they had it chalked up for a date before they were giving me the job. It was chalked up at that schedule. Come, I didn't think I could do it.
Jerome said, "I always knew this would happen to me sometime, and it did."
But I think the one that really ran me ragged was Alcohol Difference, that railroad thing.
Oh.
I saved some of those edits, and I read one over here about a couple months ago, and I tell you, it made me laugh to see how they could handle this. They'd do a job, and the man was on the way down. They had a colored man, and he'd go down, he'd barely get down, he'd come back with something else. It was this thing, and they kept me running. They'd run me ragged. And then they had a big picture. They're going to have one for the Penn Station, didn't it? I think it went up too. I never got to see it, but it went up. It was a series of heads.
And that's where the cassette tape ran out. Right in the middle of Jerome Rozen's story about a mural for Penn Station. The rest of that story and the rest of Al's interview is lost to us. Al's article, In the Shadow of Jerome Rozen, is available at thepulp.net. Thank you for listening, and keep reading the pulps. Pulp Tales is copyright 2026 by William P. Lampkin.